in commemoration of March, which is Women's History Month. Premier Pro Wrestling is going to be sponsoring for every day this month, a little mini series of shorts called Women Wrestlers You Should Know. And the first character that we're going to talk about is Awesome Kong, better known as, or in her personal life, Kaya Stevens. Now, she did work for World Wrestling Entertainment for a stint as Karma with a K. And, F me, I didn't understand why she ended up leaving World Wrestling Entertainment so quickly until I read up on it. And I'll get to the story later, but I thought, and in part probably did, Kaya probably had a little bit of quote-unquote battered wife syndrome because of her experience at TNA Wrestling. The reason that I can speak on this experience is because it was in fact Dutch Mantell who incepted the TNA knockouts. The TNA knockouts were a concept that hadn't been done before by more than one girl at a time or one female performer in the industry at a time. And he wanted girls or females or women that could wrestle. Not just eye candy, not just TNA, ironically by the name of the company. And really, that's why they named it that. They figured that they would pick up, the casual viewer by saying, TNA, what's that? And then Spike TV was also considered Spike TV for men, so that's how they ended up with TNA. And then Impact was added later as the name of the program. And today that's Impact Wrestling, but it's not the same company in any way, shape, or form other than the new company owns the library. So, yes, Dutch is in part a huge contributor to what female wrestlers are today, which is no longer just a special attraction on a card. In a lot of cases, when you're watching Raw or SmackDown or any of the WWE brands, the women are the most compelling and the most believable on said televisions. So let's talk about that word believable for a moment. Dutch wanted to bring in a handful of girls that were suggested by myself and also suggested by other people that he trusts in the business that could do what we call in the industry, quote unquote, work. I believe I was told by Dutch that he had to see Awesome Kong or Kaya Stevens at the request of Samoa Joe. Man, we didn't know what to expect. Video just doesn't do Kaya right. She is amazing. The thing that was the coolest about her is that in an industry where there isn't anything original, there's not much left that quote unquote hasn't been done. The Awesome Kong character, when you couple that with Dutch Mantell's, genius as far as booking and character development goes, you end up with something that's never been done before, and it ended up growing to be the highest rated programming that featured Awesome Kong in the history of TNA Wrestling when it was on Spike Television. I believe, and you guys could check, but I believe I've done this checking before. In the history of Spike Television, the highest rated programming is when Kimbo Slice finally fought on The Ultimate Fighter. Well, Awesome Kong versus Gail Kim was just a few tenths of a points lower. So I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I think I'm correct. The second highest rated programming in Spike TV's history featured Awesome Kong taking on Gail Kim. Now, when Kong got to the company, it wasn't run like a business. There was a lot of camaraderie in the locker room. There were some real supportive guys there, but there were also a lot of snakes there, and the same could be said for the female wrestlers because the animals basically ran the zoo. When Dutch asked me what we should pay the girls to come in and try out, and this was just the price to come in and try out so they could get a good look at the girls and figure out which ones they were going to invest in and put on television. I said, well, extras and guys that come in and work dark matches or try out for World Wrestling Entertainment, get $250. Why don't we give the girls $300 so we're $50 ahead of them, and that $50 in the long run means a lot. It shows that this company will give a shit more than World Wrestling Entertainment. Well, that's not what happened by any stretch of the imagination. Dixie Carter, Andy Barton, Sergio, I don't know his last name. I'm going to go ahead and call him Carter too, because he is basically Dixie's husband is a Carter. They thought, oh, look, we can get these girls to come in for $300, and that's what they kept them at. And you guys can go ahead and check the annals. I worked at TNA Wrestling as a production manager. You know, I know what I know. And I told the internet that this was going to happen. You know, people told me that I was Nostradamus, but I started to break down the programming. Hulk Hogan and his people were brought in after I left. There are episodes in that program that featured Hogan, and man, I can't say how much high-priced talent. I can't remember the exact price tags, okay? But it didn't matter who Kaya was wrestling at the time or the knockouts in general. For $600, which is what they were paying those girls for that segment, it was double and sometimes triple the segment of Hogan and all the high-priced quote-unquote names. And what does that tell you? It's only a matter of time before they realize that they're getting taken advantage of, to the point they were getting taken advantage of. And I'm talking about the knockouts. And if the knockouts had a leader at the time, I would say it would be Gail Kim. But a close second, and someone that could be taken more seriously because of the way she carried herself and her appearance, was Kaya Stevens. And she did. She started to rise up, you know. It was bad enough they were paying them that little, but when TNA Wrestling or Impact Wrestling or Dixie Carter or Panda Energy started being up to 12 weeks late on their pay on top of being underpaid, that was the end. They could have, you know, dragged that thing along as long as they tried to beg, borrow, and stealing, but that was the absolute end of TNA Wrestling. And I couldn't believe how stupid it was on a business front, but just on an ethical front, how they took advantage of these women. Now, back to Kaya or Awesome Kong. You know, Dutch was there, and Dutch would be the first one to tell her he didn't care what any of the idiots in creative told her or any of the knockouts told her. Do not take a bump until we work or you work with Gail Kim. And she didn't. And what ended up happening there was Kaya became something that never been done before in the history of pro wrestling. She became a female road warrior. Her presence was unbelievable. She stepped up and she listened and she added to her character development. And like I say, as far as Spike Television goes, am I lying when you look at the actual factual ratings? This is why I hate the wrestling or the internet wrestling community. I think that most of the internet wrestling community is now independent, quote-unquote, wrestlers that aren't wrestlers. They're drama queens. And they think that they can just act like wrestlers and pretend to be wrestlers. Haven't ever paid one due in the business. Well, Kaya went all the way to Japan to train. So you guys don't even have any clue, or, you know, the regular casual fan, or even if you're not a fan, has no clue how hard and how serious that training must have been taken. The other thing about it is, Kaya personally has a very strong sense of right and what's wrong, and she's pretty right when she's right. She's got integrity off the chain. The woman is educated, and she was a social worker before she got into pro wrestling. She is the most empathetic, caring person that you could ever meet. She's got great spirituality, and it's very attractive. These are very attractive qualities. You can't help but be around her, and it's just, I can't say anything but the word pleasant. But when she turns it on, she knew that she was playing a part, and she played awesome Kong. Go watch the matches. You'll see what I'm talking about. This woman was so compelling. So back to what I like to call idiots. She went to work finally after going through all this shit, being locked into that horrible one-sided contract with TNA for World Wrestling Entertainment as Karma. It was a different name, but they were going to go ahead and take her and evolve the character into real big time. And she would have been the most believable thing in that roster for a stint. Well, Kaya ended up having a miscarriage. The bad part about that was the internet falsely reported and then spread it around that she in fact had a child. So everywhere she would go, and she talks about it, she was asked, how's the baby? How's the baby? How's the baby? How is she supposed to function in any industry when she had that miscarriage, which a lot of women and a lot of couples can barely get through? How do you ever get over it being constantly reminded of it? To me, that's just plain evil. The other thing I love about Kaya is she goes ahead and admits and talks about depression. And she put depression this way. I just heard it today. Depression isn't a Nike slogan. Isn't that effing brilliant? But yeah, there's no easy way around it. When she was working at World Wrestling Entertainment, she went through all that, and on top of that, she had gained baby weight. Now, if you look at Kaya at 6'1" and about 270 pounds when she first began wrestling, for TNA, Kaya was not fat. Kaya was not a fat girl. That's her build, and she was in incredible shape. You can see by the length of the matches that she worked and the pace at that size. She was a big human being, and we're going to go ahead and say it without being offensive, a big girl. She was larger than life, and that's what the Awesome Kong character was supposed to be, But with said baby weight, and on top of that, which it takes all women time to lose baby weight, and all the women that I've known that had baby weight really freak out, and they freak out the younger that they are because all the pressure put on them, and of course all the internet and the internet trolls, and I guess we can go back to the internet wrestling community or the idiots. They would have had a field day with it. And after a while, that stuff stings and that stuff sinks in, especially if you are someone like Kaya that has to work their ass off just to function with depression, So that's why I hate them. Kaya had made a suggestion that she wanted to go while she was under contract with World Wrestling Entertainment. And get this, she couldn't handle the fact that she was still under contract and getting paid when she wasn't wrestling. She wasn't on TV and she wasn't wrestling, during all the struggles, That's the type of person that she was. Look at that. She's getting so misused and abused at TNA Wrestling, making $300 a night. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, she feels bad like she's not earning the money. I mean, isn't that say something about her character? After you've been through something like that, most people, the human nature is to come out the other end being a real asshole. Well, not Miss Kaya, But anyway, the World Wrestling Entertainment hit her up about what do we have to do to help you get back in mental, emotional, and physical shape to get you back on TV. And she suggested, she had a great plan, and I love and respect her plan even more now that I know that she's educated and also a licensed social worker, because she understands how emotions are, and she understands the term from, having depression and being in this industry and working at TNA for garbage, what the term emotional stability means, what emotional maturity means. And her plan was to go ahead and go to the same place that the Biggest Losers show was hosted at. And I thought that was a really sound plan, because there they could take care of her physical, her mental, and emotional. And if you get right down to it when it comes to weight or any addiction, it's as much mental and emotional as it is anything else. And I'm not saying, again, that Kaya had a weight problem, but I can imagine having depression and being a large girl that, that would give, that could give you a weight problem in your head. It certainly doesn't help, your current issues. So ended up happening is they gave her the, we'll get back to you about it stuff. And then at the end of the day, they wanted to send her back down to the developmental territory, which I believe at the time was NXT or Florida Championship. I don't know because I'm not good with dates. And just have her work out and get her shit together there, not understanding the fact that it was the emotional, as much. And I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't happen, was because one of World Wrestling Entertainment's television relationships is with the competing network of the show, or, the network that carried the show, Biggest Losers, which was so sad. But anyway, one thing I want to talk about before I end with this is I love this, and this is what I said in the beginning about her integrity and her sense of right or wrong. When Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff came into TNA Impact Wrestling and basically were the last nail in the coffin, all of Hogan's buddies got in there, and they were so responsible for, like I said, the lowest ratings probably in the history of the program. But one of his pals was this radio host named Bubba the Love Sponge. If you heard of him, sorry, I just don't get it, and I never did. And I've known this guy since before he went to Florida, and he was just a even fatter slob in Milwaukee, creeping around the wrestling locker rooms. He's a punk, and he takes that shock jock shit so far, and I'm going to compare him to like a wrestler that believes his own gimmick. And anybody that believes their own hype, as you know, ends up being an egomaniac and an asshole. Well, Kaya had a really personal attachment to the catastrophe that happened in Haiti, and she was publicly, with the name value that she had and the resources that she had, trying to raise money for Haiti. Well, Bubba went on the radio show and didn't just say whatever about Haiti. The comment that set her off was that he said, as far as he was concerned, Haiti was trash, and the powers of the universe gave the world a cleansing. I mean, you can't talk like that. And then somebody sent her or left her a voice message on her phone, and I'm sure it was Bubba, calling her a fat ass and dropping N-bombs. So she told everybody before it happened, if the guy shows up at television, I'm not going to be able to control myself. I'm afraid of what I might do. So nobody took her serious. He showed up, and she beat this shit out of a man. She went ahead and took her lumps and took full responsibility for what she did, But that's Kaya. In the same token, she would give you the shirt off her back, and I'm not saying that to be gross. I'm using it as a euphemism. She'd do anything for you, especially once she knows you and can trust you. Anyway, I just want to say that that was just something else to be a part of, to actually be there and be with Dutch and be with Kaya and see the development of that. Everything happens for a reason, and Kaya would tell you that. Nothing happens in God's world by mistake, and she's doing just fine. This internet wrestling community likes to talk about whatever happened to Awesome Kong, like she's a has-been. Well, she's been working on some television programs and a couple of them and many other things. But she did get brought in and added to Tony Khan's AEW collection of wrestling dolls. And they didn't know what the hell to do with her. And, Kaya, who tries to not talk bad about anybody unless they really, really have it coming, expressed her frustration and said, I tried. They didn't meet me halfway, so I stopped trying. What else are you going to do? That sounds like somebody that's really developed emotionally to finally figure that out, because it's heartbreaking to beat your head against the wall with people like Tony Khan or even Impact Wrestling after the original crew, and including myself and Dutch Mantel, who incepted the Knockouts, didn't have creative control anymore. The industry and any other company she worked for didn't have one iota of what to do with her to achieve the potential stardom that she could have. She was just an amazing trailblazer for women's wrestling because she was the first and biggest star, which really was the inception of the Knockouts to what everybody knows today, the WWE Divas, or I think they're even trying to get away from that word now. They're actually using women's wrestling, Again, I'm proud to know her. I hope that you guys appreciate what we're going to do every day this month, or I'm going to do every day this month. It's Women Wrestlers You Should Know in commemoration of Women's History Month. Please note, this is being brought to you by Premier Pro Wrestling. Without YouTube ads or commercials, support Premier Pro Wrestling. Premier Pro Wrestling on Pro Wrestling Tees, and stream the most wrestling content at Premier Pro Wrestling on Patreon. Thanks for your interest, guys. Hope you guys are loving these.